Today's invocation is from Langston Hughes. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain from those who live like leeches on people's lives. We must take back our land again, America. Oh, yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we the people must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain, all the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. Let us worship. Rise, or whatever it is you want to do to sing this first hymn. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge in pandemic times, soon to end, but not yet. My name is Nathan. I am officially your senior minister. Glad to welcome you here today. Eric Poza is the preacher, but we decided since it's such a weird Sunday, I'm going to do the end part. He's going to do a lot of the other content. Lee's here doing music. Ed Benoit's up in the sound booth. Kathy Smith is working all of the chat, so go ahead and give her a hard time if you want. Glad you're here. If you like this service, or if you don't and want other people to see how bad it is too, click the share button right on YouTube. You can share it on Facebook or other platforms that I'm going to get mad at later in the service. Some things you should know: there's a congregational meeting on the 31st. So to prepare for that congregational meeting where you will actually approve a budget, so we please need a quorum, there is 2 budget hearings. You can find out more about that on the website or in the church email. If you want to sign up to be in the choir, it's actually really kind of easy. So you just email, you go to the website and go to the music part, and you just email right there and ask to be on the choir list. What happens is Lee sends you the music. You then prop your phone somewhere. Am I correct in this? Prop your phone, tape the sheet music up around it, hit record, listen to and sing along with it, and send that video in. It's actually kind of really easy. Once you do it once or twice, it's very easy. So we can have as many of you in the choir as we want. Oh, also, if you're a bad singer, don't worry. They can turn you down a little. That's a little insider secret. Also, Monday night at 6:30, there's a social... They don't like that I said that, but everyone is a great singer, and we're going to turn you all up as loudly as possible, period. Monday at 6:30, there's the social justice meeting. And Friday, there is music bingo. Our own Mike Cavell is putting it on, and he's specializing in Louisiana music with a little hint of Mardi Gras in there. So actually, go to our website. If you're not getting our emails, go sign up for our email list. All of this stuff and more is there. Glad you're with us. What a great Sunday to be together.
Good morning. This morning's lesson is a storybook. It is called The Breaking News, written and illustrated by Sarah Lynn Royal. I remember when we heard the bad news. Suddenly, Mom is glued to the television. Dad can't stop checking his phone. They whisper, and I pretend not to hear. It is more than a little bit scary. Mom forgets to tuck me in. Dad is too tired for bedtime stories. It seems like everyone else feels it too. At school, my teacher says to look for the helpers. Even when the news is bad, you can still find good people trying to make things better in big and small ways. I want to help in a big way. I decide to put on the funniest show ever to make everyone laugh again. But the grown-ups don't feel like laughing. I tell them about the force fields I'll invent to keep us all safe, but their smiles are tiny and sad. I try to be on my best behavior all the time, to be so good, but they hardly even notice. I think maybe there is nothing I can do to help in a big way. I feel small. So maybe I can try to do just one small thing, and maybe another, and another, and maybe one more. Small things don't solve everything. The bad news is still there, after all. But then again, so are we.
Today we're thinking of Ellen Edmondson as she recovers from surgery. There'll be a card for her. Also, we are only about halfway there. We're trying to put a stone in a jar for every person who died from this stupid pandemic. Almost 350,000. We're halfway there, so if you want to sign up on our website to do that. Now is the time in our service where we place stones. You're welcome to type them in the chat or hit a little asterisk. I will place stones in your absence for you. If you have a chalice at home, light it with us. With hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
great land by every tongue.
In this week, when the importance and the power of the democratic process and the fragility of the democratic process is weighing so heavily with so many of us, I'm reminded of stories I've been hearing over the last few months, not only of people participating in that process, but what it has meant for them. One story that really stands out for me that I heard more recently, though it was written a couple months ago, it comes from Coley Harvey, who's a somewhat well-known figure in certain circles. He is a television sports commentator and reporter on cable sports networks. But he told the story back in October of his family's engagement. Now, he's based in Chicago, but his family has deep roots in Georgia. And he told the story of, I believe it was his great-great-grandfather, Joseph Harvey, who was 27 years old when he took his loyalty oath and registered to vote for the first time in the state of Georgia in the year 1868. He was still fairly newly freed from enslavement and newly enfranchised to vote, as he did. And he turned out to be the last member of his family to be able to do so for almost 80 years. Why? Because of poll taxes, because of literacy tests, because of death threats, because of living in the Jim Crow South, and all of the barriers that were put forth for his family and so many black people to be able to vote, to be able to register to vote. And that remained true until 1947. Now, this was still almost 20 years before the Voting Rights Act. But that was the year that Coley's grandmother, Elaine, turned 18. And shortly after she did, she climbed on her bicycle and rode 12 miles to the county seat, to the municipal building of Crawford County, Georgia, and walked in to ask the registrar to register her to vote. And you won't be surprised to learn he didn't want to. He was angry and essentially shoved in her face a copy of the U.S. Constitution and insisted that she read it aloud. All of it. The preamble, all 7 articles, and every amendment. I believe there were 21 of them at the time. Coley writes that Grandma Elaine read it perfectly. To his dismay, he snatched the Constitution from her and told her to sign her registration card. After she did, she rode back home and changed the narrative in her family. For the first time in 8 decades, a member of the family had been enfranchised to vote. He went on to write that his grandma Elaine is still alive. This was as of a little over 2 months ago. She was approaching her 92nd birthday. And he noted, as he wrote, that he had seen her earlier that month and how giddy she was at having filled out her 2020 November election ballot and mailed it in. It was a reminder to him that this sacred process, this sacred rite and ritual and exercise of power is important to us in ways that we sometimes lose sight of. This week, few of us have lost sight of it. We've had not only a dramatic pair of elections in the state of Georgia earlier in the week, but the incredible events of Wednesday, the surprising to some, not at all surprising to others, but shocking to many events in the U.S. Capitol building where rioters invaded the building, leading to a few deaths and countless damage, or at least I've not yet seen a count of the damage. In this time, there's something to be gained by thinking about democracy and thinking about why it's not just good for our civic lives, but what it means for us as people of faith to affirm democracy and the democratic process. I and Reverend Nathan Ryan will explore that with you later in today's service. We Unitarian Universalists express in an explicit way in our core documents what it means for us, what democracy means for us. I admit I'm not the biggest fan of our statement of 7 principles. Don't get me wrong, the principles that our Unitarian Universalist congregations all collectively covenant to affirm and promote are fine points. And the ways they're expressed, well, let's just say it's pretty clear they were written not just by committee, but by multiple committees, and then edited by other committees. You get the idea. But one of the points made in those principles, the 5th one, is that we affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. And that we do so in our congregations, and we do it in the larger society as well. In this congregation, just a couple months ago, we gathered to exercise that process, that value of democracy in one of the most vital ways that happens in our tradition, as you gathered to vote to call your new senior minister, who has now begun in that new role. I'm glad to be working with Nathan. And I am so pleased that the process went well, not surprised, but pleased. And in this week, I'm reminded of the history behind this, that those churches that came to Massachusetts 350 to 400 years ago, including the one I talked about last week, the church that the Pilgrims came as part of on the Mayflower, First Parish in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and how that church is now a Unitarian Universalist church. It's true of the other churches as well that were founded in Massachusetts over the next couple of decades, that they also shared in that democratic process, and also that many of them are today Unitarian Universalist churches. I mean, not all, but many, and many others had a split between a more orthodox group and a more liberal group that's now Unitarian. We have inherited this tradition of discerning together what it means for us to live out our religious lives and to make these big choices by our collective religious bodies, not by depending on a bishop or an external church council to send us a minister or decide on our budget, etc. These happen within the congregation. There is a tradition here, and underlying it is a theology. Sure, we often say that we don't require you to believe particular things to be a Unitarian Universalist church member, and some people, I think, erroneously conclude based on that we don't have a theology. We may not have a codified statement of theology, but there are historical and meaningful trends to our unpacking and understanding of our shared religious life that have held true over time, even as some aspects of them may have shifted and morphed. And one of the core commitments theologically, and I do think it's theological, is our view of humanity. It's a high view of the human condition and the human experience, and a high view of human agency, of moral agency, of our ability, our power to exercise our own discernment in deciding our fate and our futures. That's what we live out collectively. And that's what being part of our faith is about. We have in the last few days seen in such dramatic ways groups of people rushing into the Capitol building who had a different faith. And there were different nuances to that faith. For some, it was a cult of personality around our current U.S. president. For some, it was the cultish conspiracy known as QAnon. And for others, it was an idolatry of white nationalism and white supremacy in an explicit, acute, and personal kind. As painful as it was to see the Confederate flag in the Capitol building a few days ago, I'm reminded that our affirmation of democracy calls us to be engaged in the challenges we're facing now. And I'll say more about that engagement in a few minutes.
I'll invite you into a moment of prayer and reflection. The God that we know when we see love and justice and compassion be with us on this day. And hold angry hearts. Hold frightened hearts. Hold weary hearts. Help us to be okay. Not okay with the world as it is now, but to be okay. Help us to turn this heartbreak and anger and frustration and disgust into more justice and more kindness. May we know peace. May tyrants everywhere tremble when they remember that God is just. May we feel the disconnects in our world and transform them into the world we always deserved. Amen.
Our country faces a profound challenge to our democracy right now. These attacks at the U.S. Capitol and at many state capitals have shown how boldly many are willing to go to achieve their political ends at the denigration of our democratic processes and ideals. And that I would say that, given what's happened, is not surprising. But maybe this will surprise you. I'd argue this wasn't just a challenge to our democracy, it was a challenge to our faith. It was a test of our faith as Unitarian Universalists. Because we are a faith that affirms the democratic process. Which raises a question. How will we respond to this challenge? How will we face this test? There's so much to say there. There's so much that could be said. In this concluding segment of my portion of the service, I'll just offer some cautionary notes, some things to avoid. And I'll turn the remainder of the service over to my colleague, Reverend Nathan Ryan, our new senior minister, to offer some reflections as well. But a couple things to watch out for. One, let us not forget our values, and let us make sure that our values are playing out in our response. It would be so easy for us to demonize the people who committed these acts. And I appreciated Nathan's reflection, his pastoral reflection a few days ago, and his noting there that it is too easy for us Unitarian Universalists to push off as, oh, that's those other people, and thereby absolve ourselves. It's not spiritually healthy for us to do that. Part of the challenge is recognizing, are there tendencies within us that match, to some small extent, the dramatic actions taken on Wednesday? And when we do find that there are, what work do we have to do? And let us not avoid doing that work. Let us ask that question, and then let us face it. But it's also easy in times like these, with national challenges facing us, to politicize and politically analyze ad nauseum and to the exclusion of anything else. And that's another danger to avoid. There's a lot of political analysis that can and should happen about these events, a lot of social and cultural analysis, racial analysis, etc. We shouldn't avoid that It's right in its place and time. But it's easy to go to our heads and live in our heads and stay with those surface analyses to the exclusion of feeling our feelings. We have to grieve what's happened. And for some of us, it's going to look like sadness. For some, it's going to look at first like numbness. For some, it's going to look like virulent anger. And it may even at first be sarcastic assessment of the particularly absurd aspects of what's happened this week. And while things like the sarcasm may not be healthy places to dwell long term, if that's what you need to feel at first, let yourself feel it so that you can move through it and move on rather than staying stuck there. But it's also important for us not to offer what one theologian called cheap grace to ourselves or to others. Cheap grace to ourselves would be absolving ourselves, as we said earlier. Offering cheap grace to others would be too quickly letting people off the hook. It is true to an extent that the people who rushed the Capitol building on Wednesday were pawns of broader political movements and forces. And also, there is a need for agency and accountability of individual actions and collective actions as well, both of individuals who were in the building on Wednesday and those who were egging them on from their various locations. And I'll offer one other caution. Let's not dwell too long in surprise. I mean, I certainly was surprised Wednesday. Many of us were. And as one person pointed out, it makes sense to be shocked by these events, but surprise is different. And not everybody felt it. And I'm reminded of so many people of color who express zero surprise at what's happened, who found these events inevitable in light of recent political dynamics and in light of hundreds of years of history. I'll quickly note that immediately following the 2016 election, the results of which surprised me greatly, I spoke frequently of what surprised and disheartened me even more, which was the immediate uptick in white nationalist and white supremacist rhetoric and actions, and mentioned it frequently from the pulpit. And just before Christmas, I had opportunity to have coffee with a member of the church I was serving at the time, African-American man in his early 60s, who simply said, "And you've been talking a lot about how surprised you are. You know, we're not all surprised. We've been through this before." It was an important, and I now realize obvious point, though I had missed it until the very moment he said it. I needed to hear it, though. And I'm grateful for having heard it, because it reminds me that I live in a particular position with a particular privilege that I can challenge and should challenge. And that we can all challenge as we go forward, as we look for constructive ways to be engaged with affirming our democracy. So may it be for us all. Amen.
All right, so we come to the offering portion of the program. Got a few things for you. One, the congregational meetings at the end of the month to pass the budget. To have the budget, we need all of the pledges in. I love this church. Y'all are terrible at turning in your pledges on time. We've still got about 100 of you out. Please, 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 like today, like now, go turn in your pledge. I'm not saying that you should maybe put a saints fine on it, but you are welcome to if you want to. We could just say, the Saints are going to win if everyone turns in their pledge. Oh gosh, stop. Let me just stop. Please turn in your pledge. Glad you're with us. The other thing we're going to do is we're almost caught up with the pandemic disconnect with we neglected to share the plate for most of the pandemic, so we've been trying to catch up. So this week we are sharing the plate with the Louisiana Environmental Action Network. This is a phenomenal organization that's been doing a lot of good work for a long time. And we would love to give them a big old chunk of money. So please go to the website. Kathy's I hope she's paying attention, gonna put this in right now. I don't know if she can do it that fast. Put it in. You can give by texting. You can give, all sorts of different magic ways. But go ahead and give. This morning's offering will now be generously given and received. So we've come to that part of the service where I'm supposed to tie everything up in a nice, tidy bow. I'm supposed to synthesize what happened this past week in the Capitol into something that makes perfect sense and gives us a clear path forward. But I don't have those things. So this happened the very last day before I was to become your senior minister. I was actually on the phone with a colleague when I got a text message to go watch the TV, and I watched kind of in horror as the whole thing unfolded. So I called a number of you this week, mostly because since I started the new position Thursday, there's a whole lot of sort of quick ministry follow-up I had to do. And as I talked to you, the conversations, they always started out civil, but just below the surface, there was an unquestioning, clear and profound rage in almost every person I talked to. Some were angry that this happened. Some, I think, were angry at this as the final straw after years of foolishness, like this happening with no consequences, or decades or centuries of pressure from these undercurrents. Others were angry at the obvious disconnect between the treatment of Black Lives Matter protesters, as an example, or really the treatment of any group, it seems, protesting for their own dignity and rights. Anyone who lived here around 5 years ago, there's no doubt, has seen the swift, dangerous, and intense violence police forces can impart on protesters, largely unprovoked. And I'm sure I am not calling for more violence, but I certainly feel that anger in the disconnect between treatment. I'm reminded of the beginning of this current administration when there was the white supremacy rally in Charlottesville, and clergy from all over the country came to be a voice for justice and inclusion. And this is from a president of our association recounting that the day after they were trapped in the church where they were meeting with people surrounding the church threatening them, when they marched forward during the protest, arm in arm, the clergy did, and they expected police there to sort of be in between the two groups, and the police were nowhere to be found. So there's a history of this, and that's what I'm sort of brought back to. Now, I want to be polished for you. I want to have a way to make sense of all of this, but I am not there yet. I am angry. Surprisingly angry. Not surprised, but surprised at how close to the surface my anger is. So if you will go on an anger journey with me. Anger is not bad. Anger used appropriately is the key. Use your rage to make the world a more just place, a more loving place. Do not use your anger to hurt other people. And do not try to absolve other people of their role in your anger just by swallowing that emotion. It's unhealthy, it's dishonest, and it's not good spiritual practice. Our spiritual calling is to find a way to harness our anger for creating the kingdom of God. Or if that doesn't work for you, paradise on earth. If you read the Gospels, Jesus is not the sweet, love the little children caricature many want him to be. He is angry. Overturn the tables angry. Curse the fig tree for not having figs when it's not time to have figs angry. He calls his followers idiots, if you read the right translations. So here is who I am angry with, if you will go with me. First and foremost, I am angry with our president. I am angry that someone could stare into the face of injustice and almost without flinching take the most divisive, most violent path. And I'm angry that this happened on the same day that Georgia elected its first black senator. This is not a coincidence. I know that everyone is criticizing the president's speech right after the insurrection for saying that he loves the rioters. I don't fault him for that part. I cannot fault anyone for love. And if these folks felt more love, and I really mean this, I don't think they would have been as prone towards violence. And this idea of withholding love as a punishment is a toxic idea. Love does not mean putting up with anything. It does not mean putting up with abuse. Love does not avoid accountability. And every person who invaded our capital or who supported the invasion still deserves love. They deserve justice and accountability, but also love. No, the thing that he said that virtually all of the media reports avoided is what disturbs me. Right after the love part, he said, "You've seen the ways others are treated, others who are so bad and so evil." That was the dangerous part, and that was the part that is getting ignored, to focus on this strange puritanical punishment of boycotting love. This church's job is to hold the elected responsible. So let's also not let our president-elect off the hook. In Biden's response, fueled by the blind ideologies he's allowed to have by simply not being the person who fomented this insurrection, he claimed that this is not America. Really? What America have you been living in? Because robbery and reservationing of this land's original inhabitants, slavery, segregation, internment, lynching, intentional unjust imprisonment of predominantly black and brown people for a myriad of stupid reasons, the same bloated prisons of addicted and mentally ill and unjustly, poorly lawyered inmates that you helped create, Mr. President-elect? I could buy it if he said, "This is not the America we want to be." But he didn't say that. And not understanding the difference between the America we are and the America we want is dangerous. I'm angry at the people who entered the Capitol, but not for entering the Capitol. I've seen a number of protests with attempts to get into a building before, but nothing like this. Usually these protests are attempts at accountability. This one, however, at least based on the videos I've seen, was an intent to instill violence and terror. I'm angry with those who support this foolishness through their rhetoric, through their finances, through their willingness to spread disinformation, and those who are happy to let others storm the Capitol and take the fall for them. And I'm angry a lot of my fellow Unitarian Universalists, and maybe I'm talking about white UUs, but I'm angry at those I call colleagues and fellow religious journeyers who saw the evil and injustice of this particular administration and sought out individual absolution at the expense of universal salvation. And by that I mean those who saw the racism and violence of the current rhetoric and administration but refused to see it as systemic, refused to see our own complicity in it, and instead either physically or ideologically moved away from anyone we thought we disagreed with to avoid getting our own theology contaminated. I am angry at the elected delegation from Louisiana, not Representative Richmond, who I think technically, since he's being brought into the Biden administration, is not a representative right now. And also, this is a rare time where I'm not angry at one of our senators. So Bill Cassidy did, which was at least base level decent, by not fomenting this. Although I will not allow him to claim much more, at least much more moral ground, after his abetment during the intentional federal orphaning of children at the border. This is a moral bankruptcy where thousands of children were intentionally separated from their parents at the border, more than 500 of which have yet to be reunited. He and all who supported it should be held accountable and haunted by that decision. Today, I am furious with Senator Kennedy and Representatives Graves, Higgins, Scalise, and Johnson. Even if, and maybe especially even if, they didn't believe their own lies and were simply doing the political calculations to decide that objecting to an election that didn't go their way was the best political decision to win re-election. It takes a special kind of wicked to look directly in the face of the fear and danger that your rhetoric creates and to double down on it. I think we need some Unitarian Universalists to run against them. And I'm not joking about that. And although I mentioned it earlier, just to reiterate, I'm mad at many of us, myself included, who are intentionally separating ourselves from family and friends and neighbors, telling people to unfriend us, or relying heavily on social media's algorithmically sorted information, or even relying on cable news' self-sorting information and fomenting. Like I said, I'm angry and I haven't figured out how to tie everything up into a nice, neat package for you. And I really want to do that. And I know that you are tired. I know that this pandemic is still raging, and even though many of us have found a way to tune out the perpetual fear this pandemic plays in the back of our souls, it's still there. The last time the numbers were this high in Baton Rouge, we saw 3 members of this church die in 1 week. I don't want that to happen again. So I can't just leave you with anger. We've got to find a way together to make it through this week. So here is a little bit of my faith. And this is why I don't want you to let go of your anger. I see God as that pull towards love and justice. I see God as that work that people do to reconcile reality when they see an injustice. To say that another way, I think if we can just help people see the world as it is, not the world as they wish it were or our cognitive dissonances need it to be, if we can just see reality, just trust that seeing reality will not make us unworthy of love, the next thing that happens is the work of God. So your job is not to fix everything and withhold your love from everyone you know who has a broken theology or ideology. Your job is to find some way to first and always first keep yourself safe, and then to love the hell out of people until we can move forward. And to see ourselves in the people we've decided are not us. Do not forget your anger. Be angry. The world desperately wants to go back to the status quo. It wants us to move on, to pack this away, for it to be okay, but it is not okay. It wasn't okay on Wednesday. It wasn't okay 4 years ago. It wasn't okay 50 years ago. It wasn't okay 401 years ago, and it is not okay today. Do not let the world go back. Keep feeling whatever you are feeling, and keep remembering what you have seen. Keep being angry. But let that anger transform the world into a more just and a more loving place. Amen. Have in your mind the world that you want, the world that we deserve. Know that it's possible. Go make it happen. Please go be the reason that someone else was glad that they met you today. Go in peace. Be safe. Go in love. Amen.